Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. My name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I'm here with my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian, reanimator.
Oh, that's a movie.
Yeah, but I'm not the movie.
You're not the movie.
I'm just
You're like the guy in the movie.
I can reanimate, like when Dave's dog died a few weeks ago.
Oh my God. Jesus, Jason.
I could have reanimated.
A terrible start to this episode.
Well, it's current, and he's here. So
that is not
Hey, that dog
excuse.
had a good life, man.
I'm sure it did.
So let's just
let's not talk about it anymore at all.
You want me to reanimate your dog, Dave?
I love you, Sadie.
Oh my God. Okay. So in our third season of Awesome Movie Year, we're talking about the films of 1989. And in this episode, we are looking at a notable filmmaking debut. And in our previous two seasons, we stuck with the View Askewniverse, but that was not around in 1989. So instead, we're talking about Cameron Crowe's Say Anything.
And I would say Cameron Crowe probably a big influence on Kevin Smith. So
that is probably true.
So there is some connective tissue there.
We just definitely have to do Kevin Smith related films for this.
It's going to be very specific from now on. First time filmmakers who somehow relate to Kevin Smith.
Yes. So Say Anything was Cameron Crowe's first film as a director, although he started out as a writer, both as a journalist and as a screenwriter, and wrote Fast Times at Ridgemont High and The Wildlife, I think, is the other screenplay that he had written before this, which is not a film that I've seen. But Say Anything was his directorial debut. It was, I guess you could say it was a modest hit. It grossed $21.5 million on a budget of $16 million. So depending on, marketing and stuff, it might have just broken even.
I think it was probably, one of those hits in that it had critical acclaim and it lived on beyond just that, release. And it was a big hit on the home movie circuit, on the VHS. You go to the video store. Hey, what's new this week? No, I don't want to watch Beverly Hills Cop 3. How about this then? Say Anything.
That's a great impression of a video store clerk there.
I used to work at one.
I hope you didn't talk that way.
That's what, no matter what it was.
Yeah.
How about, what I used to do when I was a teenager, Josh?
I don't, but you're going to tell me.
When I went back to New Jersey for the summer with my friend Jay Gruber, every day we'd walk into the center and say, you could do this back in these days. It was an innocent time. There was the strip mall in the middle of town, right? And we would go to the video store in the morning and we would argue for about an hour over what movie we would want. We'd finally agree on one, but we'd say, let's not get it just yet. Let's have lunch first. So whatever movie we would want, we would put behind Bushwhacked, the Daniel Stern movie.
Film? Yeah.
Because we assumed no one would ever pick it.
Right.
And we were right. Then we'd go eat lunch, come back, go to Bushwhacked and be like, yeah, we will watch
Say
Anything or any other movie that wasn't Bushwhacked.
I don't think I ever used Bushwhacks, but I used that strategy.
You did?
Yes,
See?
absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. That's actually a nice story. I think I was expecting something. It's a very sweet little anecdote there.
Yeah, I got there's more than one side to this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jason, did you rent Say Anything back like as a teenager?
No, the first time I saw it was probably after college when, I like Cameron Crowe and I'd seen other movies of his and, you just go back through the catalog and I hadn't watched it since that viewing. So it's probably been a decade or at least I would guess since I last saw it.
Yeah, I probably about the same. I can't remember exactly when, but I don't think like as a teenager, I watched it, but maybe in college or post-college. I too liked Cameron Crowe's later films. I love Almost Famous. That's one of my favorite movies like of all time. So
I'd also throw Jerry Maguire in there.
Yeah, I know you're a big fan of that. I haven't seen that in a really long time, but I'm sure I had seen those two and was interested in his earlier films.
We knew, look, we obviously are film fans, aficionados, if you will.
Oh, are we?
Fanatics, perhaps, connoisseurs.
Oh, good. You're a thesaurus today.
Yeah. Film guys who like movies.
Sure.
So, we both knew about Say Anything
Yeah.
from the jump, and Singles obviously became somewhat iconic of that Gen X
Yeah.
growing up period. So, you know, it just took us a while to get around to watching it, it seems like.
Right. Although it was still, again, for me as well, quite a while ago. Revisiting it this time, I didn't remember a ton about it.
Yeah, me neither, really.
But like you were saying, it was critically acclaimed. It got 2 thumbs up from Siskel and Ebert. Roger Ebert said, "What's unique to this movie is how sure-footed it is in presenting the ordinary everyday lives and rituals of kids in their late teens. The parties, the conversations, and the value systems seem real and carefully observed. These teenagers are not simply empty-headed Animal House retreads. The movie pays them the compliment of seeing them as actual people with opinions and futures. Say Anything is one of those rare movies that has something to teach us about life. It doesn't have a, quote, lesson or a, quote, message, but it observes its moral choices so carefully that it helps us see our own. That such intelligence could be contained in a movie that is simultaneously so funny and so entertaining is some kind of a miracle." He loved it.
I have another Ebert quote.
Oh, do you?
Yeah,
All right.
because in 2002, in his book, The Great Movie
Yeah,
List,
he threw it in there as well.
yeah, and he wrote, "Say Anything exists entirely in a real world, is not a fantasy or pious parable, has characters who we sort of recognize, and is directed with care for the human feelings involved."
And I think he's right, is that you could come into this movie thinking, oh, it's a teen romantic comedy and from the 80s, and you know what to expect out of something like that. And there's a lot more reality to it.
Yeah, it's very grounded. And even, you know, obviously the iconic In Your Eyes boombox scene, which I think we'll get to as
Sure.
pluses and
Yes.
minuses, and has been spoofed a billion times in pop culture. I think the Lloyd character is more grounded than we would assume based on all of those spoofs of this
Right.
film.
Yeah, someone who does something like that. And Cameron Crowe, again, this was, I think, from like IMDb trivia, so you never know if that's 100% true, but supposedly Cameron Crowe credited Roger Ebert's enthusiasm in part for the box office relative success of this movie.
If it's on the internet, it's true, baby.
That's a very good point. But actually, I think the reviews were, I mean, now this is a very, very positively regarded movie, but I think the reviews were maybe a little more mixed at the time. Ebert loved it, and Siskel loved it too. I mean, watching them talk about it on the show, they both really liked it. Siskel compared it to The Accidental Tourist, which I've never seen.
Me neither. Did you go back and watch the Siskel and Ebert segment on
I
this?
did, yeah.
I love that, man.
I usually do. I try to if I can.
You're a real asset to this podcast.
Oh, thanks, buddy. But yeah, some of the other reviews were a little more mixed, and maybe more considered it more of a typical teen comedy. So Karen James in the New York Times said, "Can a nice guy named Lloyd, who has no plans for college, win the love of the beautiful ice princess who happens to be a class valedictorian? Does anyone over the age of 18 care? Say Anything has a prepackaged feel with all the fuzzy-hearted warmth of a John Hughes film. But it was written and directed by Cameron Crowe, who wrote Fast Times at Ridgemont High, a tough-minded, sardonic film that makes Molly Ringwald's high school girls seem as realistic as Dorothy in Oz. The predictable surface of Say Anything is constantly being cracked by characters who think and talk like real people, and by John Cusack's terrifically natural, appealing Lloyd. Here is a film seriously at war with itself."
Yeah, I mean, at first I was like, "Oh, this is," and then it was like, "Oh, this is," you know, it's like
Quite a ride you went on there.
Yeah,
during
who wrote
excerpt.
that again?
It's Karen James in the New York Times.
She's like one of these pickup artists who insults the person.
She's
to get
negging this movie.
Yeah, to get them to like it or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's quite as schizophrenic as she describes it, but I think that's one of its charms. That again, you come into it and you think, oh, this is the teen movie about the dork who gets the hottie or whatever, and they're both much more multi-layered than that.
Yeah, they're both somewhat eccentric in their own ways, I'd say.
Yeah. So lastly, Kirk Honeycutt in the Hollywood Reporter said, "Say Anything is an easy film to like. Ex-rock journalist Cameron Crowe, known for 2 screenplays about teenagers caught up in the fast lane, has written and directed, for the first time, a surprisingly gentle comedy about teens that concerns itself with values and love. The characters are all likable, too. No real villains here, only people who make mistakes in the name of love. All this amiability blunts the edge Crowe obviously wants to give his comedy, but the film has enough funny offbeat moments to qualify as a sleeper. And Ebert talked about that idea of values too, I think, the idea that this movie has kind of a moral center to it.
Yeah, I mean, even Diane Court's father, who is on the legal side, a villain, I guess you would say, committing crimes. He does it out of love, and I guess there's justification for what he's doing. So
right. I mean, and I think it's even with the characters, maybe he has a slightly immoral, even though he justifies it in his own way. But the movie has a sense of values. The movie has a perspective that's respectful of characters. And I saw something, I can't remember now, maybe it was on Letterboxd, but about the idea of Lloyd as this portrayal of sort of the sensitive male, or the guy who is happy to be sort of secondary in a relationship or whatever, but that also in no way it doesn't emasculate him or criticize him for that it's sort of an antidote to toxic masculinity.
Yeah, I didn't get that from it at all. I mean, not that I got any toxic masculinity from it. I thought their relationship was on equal footing in that, he got her when other gents couldn't, as even the dad said, he's not your typical frat boy type or whatever. Or maybe she said that, Diane, in the movie.
Yeah.
But I thought like they laid out the stakes at the beginning, like, hey, I'm leaving at the end of the summer to go on this, scholarship trip. And he's like, okay, let's just spend all the time that we can together. So you already know what the deal is, so I don't really think he took a back seat to anything. It was just the ticking clock of the whole film.
Right. And I think it's not that he takes a back seat in their relationship, but the idea that she's the kind of accomplished one who has ambitions and he is happy to just be her support system.
Oh, you don't think we've ever seen that in films before?
I'm not saying we never have. I'm just saying that in this particular instance, someone pointed out that that's not a typical romantic comedy setup, and that the movie validates that without
I'm
judging.
not a smart man, but I know what love is.
Are you comparing this movie to Forrest Gump?
No, I'm just saying we've seen plenty of dudes who, like, hey, you're too good for me, but I'll fight for you. We've seen that 100 times. I don't agree with this anonymous letter boxer.
Yeah, I don't remember who it was, and maybe but I felt like they had some validity to that. But that's kind of getting us off track here. The other background here is this movie also got a B+ from CinemaScore, the audience polling service. So audience is generally positive about it. And like you said, even if it wasn't a massive success initially, at the box office, it's certainly become extremely beloved and popular over time. And are there any other background things you wanted to mention?
Made all those EW lists of greatest romance or films or greatest high school movies, which of course Fast Times is too. That we should watch that other Cameron Crowe movie. I don't even know that movie.
Oh yeah, I don't either, and I'm not sure if it's got a positive reputation. But those are both those are the two that he wrote before he started directing.
Yeah. Other than that, no, I think you hit it. We see a lot of actors that we'll come to know in the future in small parts. So that's another fun bit of it.
Right. Yeah. Some debuts here and people who are uncredited. So, all right, well, then let's take a little break and we'll come back and talk about our general thoughts on Say Anything. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1989, we're talking about a notable filmmaking debut. In this case, it is Cameron Crowe's Say Anything. And I think, as we were both saying, we had seen this movie each a while ago. And so revisiting it this time, did you like it more or less? What were your thoughts?
I think I liked it about the same. I think, obviously, the dialogue and the acting is the strength here. I would say midway through Act 2, it kind of like, I don't want to say it unravels, but it goes in all these different directions. And you're like, oh, I don't know. But he does tie up all the loose ends when it's all said and done. So, yeah, it's a fun movie. It's not as tight or polished as his later work, but this is his first efforts in that area. So
right.
I think I liked it. And obviously, iconic John Cusack one of the great teen angst filled lovers of all of cinema history.
Yeah, I think I maybe liked it a little more just because, as we were talking about before, I loved Almost Famous so much. And I came to this movie thinking, oh, Cameron Crowe is a genius and I should see all the other brilliant things that he's done. And this movie has a very strong reputation. And I think I had very high expectations that I was a little disappointed at that time. Like you were saying, it's maybe not as tight as his, I don't want to say his later work because his more recent work is kind of a mess.
Yeah.
But as his most well-known films. But this time I think maybe my expectations were a little more moderate. And so I quite enjoyed it, especially probably the first half. And the performances are really good. John Cusack, again, is, like you said, the iconic sort of dorky teen in love. But I thought Ione Skye was really good too. And this movie, one thing it does well is that it doesn't make her into just this sort of symbol of what Lloyd wants to attain. She's a fully realized character too.
I agree with that. She's a blossoming young woman who's going to be a big part of the future. Probably a state senator.
A state senator?
I think she could have been a senator, Diane Court. That's even a good
Not
name.
a regular senator, just a state senator?
Well, I mean,
you don't want to give her put too much
no, a
pressure on
U.S.
her?
senator. Yeah,
Okay.
she could start in the state assembly and move her way.
All right.
Court for Senate sounds good.
Sure.
You know, and hopefully she won't fall into some financial discord like her father and go downhill. Just, you know, everyone has an Achilles heel. For the courts, maybe it's financial scamming.
Nowadays they just dig back into her parents' business.
That's true. Yeah, I don't know if she could. I don't know if she
problematic.
could get elected because her father went to jail for embezzlement.
Oh my. Well, then I guess she will have a successful career as
A lawyer.
she could be a lawyer, I guess. Sure, we can give her that. Dave, did you watch the movie?
I did watch this movie.
Yay!
I was very
First time
excited
ever.
when I saw on Letterboxd
First
that Dave
time
had watched
ever.
this movie.
Yeah.
All right.
I was very proud of myself, guys. No, I did watch it. And as I was watching, I wasn't sure if I've ever actually seen it before. You know, I think I must have. You know, it's just one of those classics everybody kind of saw back when we were, you know, much younger. But yeah, I thought it was great. I thought everybody in it was great. And I just love how it really like captured what, you know, young people basically are. You know, I joked in my Letterboxd review that you know, what came first, this or what young people actually, you know, are, you know, in real life.
See what impact you can have on this show when you actually watch the movies, Dave.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, he obviously, look, from Fast Times on, I mean, he's always been good at kind of writing teenagers and telling those stories.
Yeah, especially in these early films, I think when he's closer to that stage of life, he had a very good understanding of how people behave and the way they talk. Even though, I mean, the dialogue in this movie is somewhat stylized in a positive way. We remember all those lines because they're so sharply written.
Yeah,
But
there's a lot of good quotable lines in this film.
Yes, there are. But I do think, yeah, I agree that he has a good understanding. This feels real. I mean, even if it's heightened at times, it feels emotionally real. And as Roger Ebert pointed out, it doesn't feel like the kind of goofy, cartoonish portrayals that we get in a lot of teen movies, including, honestly, in some John Hughes movies. I mean, who is like the gold standard for this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of his stuff is really exaggerated and silly. And I don't think there's anything in this movie that you could call silly.
No,
really.
but I also think as teenagers, like, your scope of the world is so myopic that you become exaggerated and silly over young love and financial crimes. No, but I mean, you know, whatever your immediate situation is, that's the whole situation of the world, right? So this is it. This is the end all be all for them. So I could see the heightened dialogue, as I'm sure I probably was a teenage fool myself at one point in time.
Right. Well, not that there can be fools. And obviously, I mean, we have Lily Taylor's character who is so obsessed with her doofus ex-boyfriend that she writes 65 songs about how he cheats on her.
Songs, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously that's what you're talking about, that kind of teenage obsession where you feel like your little breakup is like the only thing that matters in the entire world.
That scene was a little weird with Lily Taylor and her boyfriend at the party. The dialogue there was a little weird. I thought that was a little clunky.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think it's maybe meant to be. It's an awkward interaction. And he is obviously inarticulate. And I think you can see in that scene where we've seen her a few times now as she plays Lloyd's one of his best friends. And so we have a respect for her. And she's obsessed with this guy. And he finally shows up and says some stuff. And he's completely inarticulate and stupid and obviously worthless.
Yeah, he's no good.
And so we get to see her reject him after having been obsessed with him for so long. And that's kind of a nice little moment.
Yeah, but it wasn't like a rejection of like, oh, this is now I'm coming from this point of view of strength. It was more of like, I really do see what an asshole you are, and it continues to hurt me, so I just have to go now.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, she's a secondary character, so she doesn't have the arc that the other characters do. But I think within her little side storyline, that's a somewhat satisfying moment.
I mean, you know, we all know the probably the most famous line is I gave her my heart and she gave me a pen.
Yes.
Right. But there's so many good lines in there of, you know, when the drunk Jeremy Piven comes barging up for his keys, like, you must chill.
Yeah.
You know, and then I my favorite, I think, is call me tomorrow. And then Diane Court says, today's tomorrow. So Lloyd says, then call me today. You know, that's a great line.
Yeah, there's a lot of really, I mean, in the romantic, you can tell that they're falling in love. I think that's one of the toughest things to do in a romantic movie is to get the sense of people actually falling in love. And I think Cameron Crowe does a great job with it. And John Cusack and Ione Skye have genuine chemistry that you can believe these two people coming together, even though they're from very different backgrounds.
Yeah, I would say a flaw though is they almost like premeditate the next beat of the film in dialogue. So it's like, you know, like, oh, we went on a date and it was great, but we should just be friends. And then they'll like have a conversation. We'll just be friends. And then they like sleep together, right? And then like the next scene will be Diane Court's dad saying like, you should break up with him. So the next scene after that is like, hey, I have to break up with you. You know, it becomes a little, you know, stuck in its ways at points.
Yeah, I guess. Although I had sort of expected that the breakup would be more like you were saying, where the dad actually says like, you must break up with Lloyd. And she says, okay, I will. But he like kind of hints at, or more than hints at it, he basically says, Lloyd is not right for you. But then he sort of backs off and says, you should do what you think is best. And then she breaks up with him anyway. And it shows you how influenced she is by the dad, that even though he's said like, you do what you want or what you think is best, she takes his opinion so seriously that she breaks up with Lloyd anyway, even though he isn't like giving her some sort of ultimatum.
Right. I had read that the kind of impetus of the idea was James L. Brooks had seen a story of, you know, a guy going to jail, and he's like, well, that would be interesting if we could do a romantic comedy of, you know, some young person and what their relationship is with a parent who goes to jail. What did you think of that John Mahoney character? Because he was so good and loving in so many ways, and then he committed, you know, fraud or whatever it was. So I thought that was interesting that they really kind of shaded him as more than just honey,
right,
you're late, you know.
Yeah, I read again somewhere, and I can't remember where, some commentary saying that this movie, it's like a love triangle between Lloyd and Diane's dad, because there's no rival for Lloyd's romantic affection, but she is so attached to her dad that, again, she takes his opinion so seriously that she does what he just kind of even implies that she should be doing. So I like that about him as a character, and that he isn't just a villain either. I mean, he does something that's obviously bad and wrong, and he justifies it by saying he does it because he wants to help Diane and give her everything. And you can sympathize with that desire to do that, and yet still understand that what he did is wrong, and sympathize with her anger at him.
Right.
And I don't think he doesn't come around at the end, in the sense that in that last scene in the prison, he's not like, oh, Lloyd, I was wrong about you. He still kind of doesn't really like Lloyd,
Yeah.
but he understands that Diane and Lloyd are together, and Diane doesn't entirely forgive him, but she also still loves him. And I thought that was a good mix of emotions.
I think that's all fair. And he did, in the end, take the heat for what he did. He didn't try to fight it, and he just said, like, let's just get this over with. So,
Right.
yeah, interesting. Did you read who the other potential fathers were?
I might have, but I don't remember. I know you always like the alternate
I do
casting.
like that to see what the movie. Dick Van Dyke,
Oh, I think I had read
maybe
about
too
that.
likable. Right?
Yeah, although I think Dick Van Dyke could do a bit of darkness. I think he's done it maybe occasionally.
Yeah, on Diagnosis.
Yeah,
Murder.
Diagnosis Murder. No, I can't think of what now, but I think he has.
And then the other one was Richard Dreyfuss, who I think would have been too young at that time, but
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, I'm thinking of current Richard Dreyfuss, who obviously is not too young, but I think he could have done that.
yeah, I think the word was that he sent Cameron Crowe back a note that said, "Great script, I want to play Lloyd." Which
Well,
is
yeah,
fun.
maybe he was like in his 30s or something
Yeah.
at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, he definitely should not have played Lloyd.
Yeah, well, hey, I got some more alternate castings
Oh,
for
do
you
you?
if
Okay,
want.
sure.
Yeah, so the two I had read for the Diane role were Jennifer Connelly, who we all love.
Yeah,
So,
she could have been good.
yeah, and Elizabeth Shue, also good.
Yeah.
The choices for Lloyd, not as good. Not as good here. We'll start with we'll start at the top and maybe work our way down there. So Robert Downey Jr., they said turn the roll down.
Yeah, he could. I mean, he did a lot of similar stuff like this in the 80s.
Right. Christian Slater, who
Also did that.
right,
Yeah.
it becomes a different movie with him,
Right.
but it's still good. Peter Berg becomes a very macho.
Yeah,
The kickboxing aspect of Lloyd, he probably would have been right
yeah.
on. And then Lauren Dean and Todd Field, who were like bit players in the actual movie.
Okay, I
But
don't know.
my favorite, Kirk Cameron.
I mean, that would have been bad, but at the same time, you can see why someone wanted to cast Kirk
In the
Cameron in
80s.
1989. Because
Say anything that Jesus wants you to say.
yeah, I think the Jesus stuff was still that hadn't happened yet.
Yeah.
That was just a seed.
Yeah,
Mike Seaver.
right?
Say
I mean,
anything.
Kirk Cameron had what was it like Father Like Son with Dudley Moore? That was probably in the same year.
Yeah, did they do a body switch in that one?
Yeah, it was a body switch movie. So he was definitely being primed to become a movie star around this time.
Yeah, and then he became Kirk Cameron.
Yeah. And so I think things worked out better for this movie without him. But you mentioned the kickboxing, and that was one of the funny things and one of the things that I hadn't remembered because we think of Lloyd as this sort of quintessential dork.
I did not think of him that way. You thought of him that way.
I mean, I feel like in pop culture, that's how he is portrayed. And that's what even the reviews at the time described this as like the movie about the dork who gets the hot girl.
I just didn't see it. I mean, dude, he's always wearing a Clash t-shirt. And I mean, I personally love the Clash, but even if you don't, you're not going to be like, hey, why are those dorks wearing that seminal punk band
Yeah, I never
t-shirt,
thought
you
of him
know?
as a dork either.
He's
I was,
kickboxing, he's self-sufficient in his own way.
kickboxing's a little bit of a weird character
Masculine.
trait, but I always thought of him as more of just like just kind of like a
Proto hipster.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Someone who's sitting in his room crying to the Cure, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like so maybe not a dork, but a hipster or someone who cries to the Cure, you don't think of that as someone who is like really into kickboxing.
Right.
That's my point.
True, though.
Mm.
That the idea of him as an athlete and not just like a guy who does it for fun, but he wants to be like a professional kickboxer. He loves Don the Dragon Wilson, who
Yeah.
has a cameo in this
That
movie.
is exciting.
Yeah.
The other thing he wants to do professionally is love Diane Cole.
Right. And that goes back to what I was saying before. The idea that like, okay, maybe he wants to be a kickboxer, but I think even Lloyd understands that being a kickboxer is probably a not realistic ambition. And what he really wants to do with his life is that he's happy to just support Diane in what she does with her life.
Right. But he was also teaching kickboxing at the local kickboxing academy.
Right. And that's not to say he's going to be a house husband, but just that she has large ambitions and he has small ambitions and he's okay
Yeah.
with that.
That's true.
Yeah.
She's going to be president of the PTA.
Or
And-
president of the United States.
And he'll be assistant coach of the Little League team.
Right. Yes. He will definitely be assistant coach of the Little League team. Now, I feel like if we made a Say Anything 30 years later, well, maybe 30 years later is too later, but 10, 15 years later, that's where he would be.
Yeah, I guess you could make that movie, but
Well, not now. Yeah. Now it would be a little too late.
yeah, I know. Thank
And
you.
We don't want to see John Cusack really do anything at this point. I don't think.
He's kind of fallen off these last few years.
He has indeed, and we can talk about that a little later. I feel like the other thing, we can't not talk about music if we talk about a Cameron Crowe movie.
Absolutely.
Yeah, music's great in this. I mean, you know, everyone always, you know, "In Your Eyes" is the big song from the iconic scene, which if you watch that scene, not that believable, that scene.
Yeah, well, it's not that. I mean, I thought it was. Do you mean it was unbelievable? You didn't feel like the characters would do that?
No, I did because of what we saw in the car where, you know, after they have sex, she's just like, let's just listen to this song. It's great.
Right.
But the way it's shot in two different states at two different times, he's clearly in a park, you know, which is where his shots were, where his.
I mean, there could be a park across the street from her house or something.
We've seen her house though.
Yeah.
She lives on a block. It
Right.
doesn't look like he's on a block in front of the
Yeah.
house at all.
I guess. I mean, that didn't really bother me. I guess my feeling seeing that this time was that it's so iconic, and yet it didn't feel like the turning point of the movie or anything. In fact, I think if you had known that iconic scene, you would assume that immediately after that scene, she like rushes out to him and they get back together. But that doesn't happen. I mean, in fact, it doesn't get them back together at all. And it takes a while for them to actually get back together.
Probably if they had played the other Peter Gabriel classic, Salisbury Hill, which is in
every movie trailer.
8,000 movies, you know.
Yeah, and every parody movie trailer.
Yeah, I love that song, but
Yeah.
man, they really ground that one out of movies.
They did. Well, I mean, and In Your Eyes too, which is a nice song, because that scene is so iconic and it gets parodied so much, I feel like that has sort of lost its impact as well.
Yeah, I had read that, you know, it was originally supposed to be Billy Idol's To Be a Lover or Fishbone's Question of Life or Turn the Other Way. And I don't know. I don't think it would have had the impact without In Your Eyes, because that was just the song of that moment that fit so perfectly.
Yeah, that was absolutely the right choice, and the perfect, like you said, it has that right. I think it has that right balance where it's like a romantic ballad, but it's not super cheesy. It feels like something the characters would listen to and something that he would choose to play for her at that moment. So I think that moment is good, but I don't know that it's like it makes the movie.
I'll tell you, I had one other favorite musical moment
Yeah.
at the beginning of the movie at the graduation, where the dude's singing Whitney Houston's Greatest Love
Yes.
of All in a totally
Off
just
key.
a cappella way for no reason at all. That was
Yeah.
great.
And then the audience goes crazy for that, and then Diane gets up and gives her big speech, and nobody likes it.
Yeah.
I was particularly psyched to hear Depeche Mode Stripped during the party scene, which I wish I was of age to go to parties when Stripped is the kind of song that would play at a
I
party.
can understand.
Well, I
Yeah.
don't know. See if that would have even been the case, because Cameron Crowe, of course, is a music.
He invented that.
Yeah,
like-
right. I mean, and he puts that in because he loves that song, not necessarily
Yeah.
because teens were listening to it.
Yeah.
I thought the music choices too show the way that this movie is sort of like on the cusp of the 90s, in that we have like Soundgarden and the Red Hot Chili Peppers and Fishbone,
Mhm.
who we think of all as like big 90s bands, and then Peter Gabriel and Depeche Mode and stuff like that. That's very 80s. So
Yeah.
it's really right on that cusp.
That party sequence that Dave's talking about is maybe the strongest sequence of the movie, other than the falling in love montage, and which leads to the sex and all that fun stuff. But that sequence where you get to know all these like minor characters like Piven and Eric Stoltz, and you see Lily Taylor and the Joe character, the boyfriend. I thought that whole sequence was really good, showing all the crazy crap that happens at high school parties.
Yeah, I mean that the party is sort of a cliche of the teen movie, but I agree. I think that's done well, and that's a sequence where it has some of the funniest stuff in the movie, like you were saying, that Jeremy Piven "You Must Chill" moment.
Yeah.
But it also has a lot of building of their relationship, where you see them in separate places in the party, and they're always kind of looking at each other and checking in with each other, and you can see that connection growing. So yeah, I agree. I like that sequence a lot. And I randomly watched, there's one of the deleted scenes on the DVD is a bit from the party where Lloyd is giving advice to some random girl. And I mean, it was probably not unnecessary. It was fine to cut the scene, but it gives you the sense again of him as this kind of stand-up guy. She's saying, oh, I kind of like this guy and I kind of liked his friend, and this is what happened. And he's like, don't date either of those guys. And he's just
Yeah.
very confident in what he's telling her.
He's-
And he's clearly right.
he said, "There are too many guys out there. You find yourself a man."
That's another
Yeah,
good line.
I'm riffing off of the,
Right.
but no, I do. Going back to the Lloyd character, that's a good example of him being a stand-up guy, and he doesn't get screwed over by like, oh, she left me for the bad boy type thing. It's just timing doesn't work sometimes.
Right. It's just life, and she has a lot going on. And again, because she's a fully realized character, we can see how much is happening in her life and how that stresses her out and how it might lead her to break up with him.
I will say, I think this is a great last scene in a movie.
Yeah, with the on the airplane.
Yeah.
I agree with the sort of tension of what's going to happen and having that little ding at the end.
Right. She's not a good flyer. We've already known that throughout. That's been there. And he's going with her to London. And, we have those moments of, he says, if there's a problem on a plane, it usually happens in the first 5 minutes. So once that pilot turns off the fasten seatbelt sign, you hear that ding, it's going to all be okay. And then it's just pause, beat. What's going to happen? I thought it was going to end there.
Right. I kind of
You
did
know?
too. I couldn't remember. And it's a very like before sunset or before sunrise.
That
kind of
would have
thing.
been right.
Yeah.
And then when are we going to hear that ding? And then eventually you hear it, and that's the last thing in the movie.
And it's obviously, a metaphor for how things are going to go for them. Some slight criticism I had while watching it this time is that Lloyd is great, but maybe Lloyd is too great. That there are so many scenes of people around him, like his friends, Lily Taylor's character and the other friend character.
Was that Pamela Adlon?
It was Pamela Adlon.
Yeah.
She was sort of like a tertiary friend, but the other like main friend, I forget who that actress is, but they talk constantly about how great Lloyd is. His sister tells him he's great. Like he needed maybe an extra flaw, I thought.
Jealous, Josh, that you didn't get yourself a Lloyd?
That I didn't get a Lloyd or I didn't get a Diane. I mean, they're
you
both
don't
great.
have a Lloyd.
No, I don't.
No,
have a
I
Lloyd.
think all right, fair. That's
Yeah.
fair.
I mean, I don't know. He's such a, like you were saying, he's this quintessential like romantic comedy hero or protagonist or whatever. And I thought maybe he could have a little more of a flaw. I mean, even things that you could think of as flaws, like his lack of career ambition or whatever, are shown to be endearing
I
qualities.
think
to
you
him.
could make that same argument for Jerry Maguire. He does that Superman thing quite a bit, Cameron Crowe.
Yeah. I haven't seen Jerry Maguire in a while, but I think you are correct about that. So, any other performances that we should note in this movie?
Well, we mentioned BB Newirth. She was fun in there.
Yeah, her first. I like that scene because she's the school counselor.
I know. I thought she was like a student or something.
No, that's why it's funny about that scene is because she's the school counselor. And so she's standing there giving Lloyd all this advice about what he should do with his career and how he should go to college. While in the meantime, she's handing him her keys because she's about to go get drunk at the students' high school party,
Yeah,
which I thought was
that's
just a
funny.
really funny detail.
Yeah, you couldn't do that today, probably.
Probably not, but I thought it was done very well in sort of an understated way.
Yeah, I mean, it's always fun to see Philip Baker Hall, even though this performance, he just pretty much had exposition of your dad's a bad
Right,
guy, did
he's
a
the
bad thing.
IRS guy prosecuting
Yeah,
Diane's dad.
and then the other one was uncredited Dan Castellaneta.
Dan Castellaneta,
Yeah.
from The Simpsons. I think his scene was cut, though, wasn't it?
I think you're probably right. But it's interesting because James L. Brooks produced it,
Right.
and then they showed Simpsons a short film of The Simpsons at a lot of screenings before this play.
Yeah, this
So-
was right around when The Simpsons was starting. Yeah, Jeremy Piven, we mentioned, who is very Jeremy Piven.
Man, but he always knocks that role out of the park.
Yeah, I mean, back in this time he did. I think he kind of got a little too wrapped up
Pivot-y?
in it. Yeah, he did get a little too Piven-y.
Yeah.
And Eric Stoltz is fun
he
in his little.
over-pivened.
That is a fair assessment
Yeah.
of his career. The party scene, yeah, Eric Stoltz is fun in his little role as the host of the party.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of fun short appearances in this movie from people that we would end up seeing later. Joan Cusack playing her brother's sister.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was wondering if this was the only movie in which they had played brother and sister.
No way.
Yeah, they've done it a bunch.
Yeah. I think Gross Point Blank, right?
Was she in Grosse Pointe Blank too?
I feel like it. I don't know.
I was just going through her filmography, and by like her third movie, they had played brother
Yeah,
and sister.
High
so-
Fidelity or something. I
Yeah,
don't
it's
remember,
happened a
but-
few times, but she's always welcome to see as well. So out of 5 boom boxes,
5
did you wanna-
Toshiba RT-SX1 boom boxes.
Oh, that's good that you
Yeah,
looked up the model number of the
I
boombox.
did.
That's the most important thing.
3.5.
Yeah, I agree. 3.5. But I think it's a very good movie. I mean,
Yeah.
I haven't, some people feel like this movie is like, I don't know, just super meaningful to them. And I didn't get that, but it's really entertaining.
Yeah, I bet like we always talk about your sister. I bet she feels like
She loves this. I know.
Yeah.
I had saw again, just going on Letterboxd. I don't think we've talked about it, but I saw her rating and she gave it like 4.5 stars, and she was a big fan.
I
of
can
it.
understand that. It's one of the better romantic comedies that have been made.
Yeah, and I think it's got a lot of genuine emotion that I can see people getting kind of swept up in. So we'll come back then and talk some more about the legacy of Say Anything. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1989, we're talking about a notable filmmaking debut, which is Cameron Crowe's Say Anything. And this movie has a very strong legacy. I mean, we talked a lot about the iconic, certainly the boombox scene, which is people who've never seen this movie and never even heard of this movie, I think, know that scene.
Probably a bunch of little emo fans out there who love that band without even knowing where the name came
Yes,
from. Right?
I'm glad we both noted down emo band Say Anything
Yeah.
as an important part of the legacy here.
Yeah, some other things. There was supposed to be a TV series version of it, but they had never run it by Cameron Crowe, so he kind of kiboshed that. You would mention the music, which I think was a legacy point because soundtrack became so integral to Cameron Crowe's movies.
Yeah, I remember Singles, which was his next
Yeah.
film. And I have seen Singles, but I bought the soundtrack to Singles probably 5 years or more before I ever bothered even seeing the movie because the soundtrack was such a huge deal.
Yeah, I'd like to see it again because that's another Seattle-based movie, right? And those are the 20-somethings. So that is a very logical next step from Say Anything. And I haven't watched that since my initial viewing, whenever that was.
Yeah, I haven't either. And I think when I saw that, I had a similar reaction to when I first saw Say Anything, which is that I had loved Almost Famous so much, and I was ready to love another one of his films, and I was a little let down. And that movie, Singles, doesn't have nearly the reputation of his other early films of Say Anything or Jerry Maguire or Almost Famous. Of those first four, that's probably the least well regarded.
Singles is a good movie.
I'm not saying it's not a good movie, but I think in sort of the critical sense or in the pop culture sense, it's the one that gets left behind most. But I'd be eager to see it again and hopefully be a little more into it.
Yeah, I'd like to see that again too. One fun note, since we're talking about Seattle, there's Cusack's driving on the highway multiple points in this movie.
Yes.
And at one point, I think it was after she broke up with him and he's like driving all night. And then he's in the rain, making that call that
where he gives that iconic line.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. The pen.
Yeah.
That rain gets called back in High Fidelity, the makeout rain.
Oh yeah. I haven't seen High Fidelity in a long time either.
And then he drives by a movie theater, Guild 45 theater, and Tapeheads is playing in the background. And Tapeheads stars
John Cusack. Have you seen Tapeheads?
I have seen Tapeheads.
Oh yeah, is that good?
That would be a good one for a cult classic of the 80s. I think it was 88. It's him and Tim Robbins, and they become like music video directors. So it's like not something you could really replicate today.
Yeah.
Yes, it's good, but it's better because it's so time stamped.
Right. Dave, as a film composer, what do you think of Cameron Crowe's use of music in his films?
Yeah, I mean, he's one of the great when it comes to making that, soundtrack album thing, it's absolutely, you could see it here. And then, of course, Singles and everything since then.
I mean, Jerry Maguire was a huge soundtrack, and Almost Famous was a huge soundtrack.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what was on the Jerry Maguire soundtrack.
Secret Garden, Springsteen song.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
if it was
that's right.
Springsteen then.
And then the Free Fallin', the scene with Free Fallin' was an iconic scene.
Oh, that's right.
Okay, yeah, I haven't seen Jerry Maguire in so long, but
And
I've seen
then-
Almost Famous like a bunch of times.
And then Cuba Gooding sings What's Going On at His Wedding, which is a very weird choice.
Yeah.
So there's a lot, man. You just
all right, no, I'm not disagreeing. I was just saying I didn't remember because I haven't seen it in a long time.
with Secret Garden, it was such a hit. I remember they did like those radio remixes where they'd play the song with dialogue.
Oh,
from the
those
movie.
are terrible.
Yeah, pretty much. So.
Yeah, I mean, Almost Famous, obviously, which is about a music journalist. So, of course, the music is going to be essential to it. But that to me is his best movie. And that is honestly one of my favorite movies of all time.
Almost Famous is awesome. I would not argue. I mean, honestly, if you picked any of those first four singles, no, Jerry Maguire and Almost Famous, those would be the two I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, I love Almost Famous. But then, of course, there are the movies he made after Almost Famous, which are not so good.
Yeah, Vanilla Sky didn't like.
Yeah, Elizabethtown, which
didn't
is
see that
a
one,
notorious failure.
Yeah.
And I kind of have a soft spot for We Bought a Zoo.
I agree. That movie was fun. That
Yeah.
movie's not bad at all.
But it's it's nothing even remotely on the level of the early films.
Does Vanilla Sky have a cult following?
I don't think it even does, really.
It seems like I
maybe
always
the
hear
original
people say they
does.
love it.
Yeah, the original probably does. Open Your Eyes, the Alejandro Amenábar film.
Right.
But no, I think Vanilla Sky is mostly forgotten, and Elizabethtown is just notorious for being a failure, and also for being the way that the term manic pixie dream girl was first coined.
Right.
That was
in an article about
Elizabethtown?
it. Well, it was not in the movie; it was in an article about the movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I always thought that was a Garden State thing.
No, it was Elizabethtown.
Oh.
Although I'm sure it does apply to Garden State too, but
Yeah.
Elizabethtown was the first use of it.
But I mean, what got panned more, that or Aloha, which I did not see.
Right, Aloha probably did too, and Aloha is quite bad. And I think both in Elizabethtown and Aloha both were movies that were also like rewritten and reshot and where he had a lot of trouble. And you can see his storytelling instincts seem so good in those early movies, and that he just kind of lost that.
Did he just get old and was not able to write about older people?
I don't know. And yeah, I mean, because you would think that the thing about getting old would be as if he was still trying to write about teenagers and was kind of out of touch, but he doesn't. He does start writing about older people. I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't want to see a movie of his about teenagers now, because I think that would be even worse.
I mean, I would give him the benefit of the doubt on anything.
Yeah.
But I mean, as bad as those movies have been received, the Pearl Jam documentary, the Leon Russell and Elton John documentary, those were both quite acclaimed.
Yeah, and I've seen the Pearl Jam documentary because I'm a big Pearl Jam fan, and it was fine, but it wasn't anything like a notable filmmaking achievement. I mean, he interviewed the dudes in Pearl Jam, and they talked about the band. And if you like Pearl Jam, it's worth seeing, and if not, there's no reason to see it.
I guess there's a Tom Petty one. I had never seen that one. And I don't remember the show Roadies. Do you, Josh?
I do. I watched a few episodes of it because I reviewed it when it premiered, and it was also just, I mean, it seems like exactly the kind of thing that would be perfect for him. And it's just so tone deaf in the way the relationships are written, and even the world of, I think what's maybe the worst sign of someone who kind of lost it is when they're writing about something that they know a lot about, like a world that they're very, very familiar with, and yet it feels completely phony.
That is a real bummer.
Yeah, and that was to me the way that
passed
show
them
felt.
by or something.
Yeah.
Well, that's a bummer, man, because his best is some of the best out there, right? So
it is, and I would give him the benefit of the doubt, like you were saying. I mean, I assume, although Aloha really failed pretty hard and Roadies was canceled after one season, I assume he'll get the chance to make something else.
Yeah,
and I'll check it out.
Anything since Roadies?
Yeah, it's been a few years, and I mean, I think he still does some writing for Rolling Stone, and he produced, and it was interesting, the recent David Crosby documentary, which he didn't direct, but as I was watching that movie, there's scenes where they're interviewing David Crosby and you can hear the interviewer.
Yeah,
I was like, I'm pretty sure that's Cameron Crowe doing the interviewing. So I'm not sure how those credits were divided up and why he's not the director, but I think he was pretty heavily involved in that. And he certainly knows about classic rock.
Yeah.
I feel like he could just make classic rock documentaries for the rest of his career.
Yeah, but we don't want that. I mean,
no.
He was a producer on that documentary. Who knows? I mean, he is notorious for taking his time writing screenplays and developing his movies. So maybe he's got another rabbit's foot in there that he's going to pull out.
Yeah, maybe. I would be happy to see it if it was announced. I mean, I was eager to see Aloha, and even through all the terrible press that it got leading up to it, I went into that movie thinking, okay, I'm going to hope to like this. And it didn't work.
Yeah. I didn't see it.
Yeah, and you don't need to see it.
In a way, like I want to be a Cameron Crowe completist, but in a way I don't, because I haven't seen Aloha or Elizabethtown, and I'm like, I can still hold them up here in this regard. And I feel like with Elizabethtown, I almost want to see that more because it was such a reviled film. But Aloha just is like, dude, you're just gotta call it a day. You jumped the shark.
Yeah, Aloha is way worse, I think, from my memories. Elizabethtown it's a very poorly structured movie, and it's very long, and it has a whole like sort of extra plot that comes at like the 2-hour mark or something, where it's like a road trip thing. And I it's been a long time since I saw it, but I remember watching the movie thinking, this should have been the movie. And so there's parts of it that are really good. But yeah, overall, Aloha, I think, has some sort of nuclear bomb storyline towards the end of it, something like that. It's
Asian
just,
Emma Stone.
Well, and that too. And like you can within the context of the movie, you can almost see why he thought that was a good idea. But the whole like, I mean, it's not a bomb, or it's like a missile is going to be launched and Bradley Cooper has to stop it or something like that. Watching the movie, you're just like, what was anyone thinking making this movie?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like any director, because was Vanilla Sky? It must have been a hit. It had Tom Cruise.
Yeah, I think it did all right.
You know, Cameron and
Cameron Diaz. Yeah.
So yeah, but man, like who's had that like ascent and then that great fall with like, you know, 4 really good movies, and then it just keeps going down without one coming back up.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, we talked about Rob Reiner when we talked about North, and he had a longer run and then kind of fell off with North and had one more big one, but you know, and then just went on this long, slow decline over the course of like 6 or 7 movies. I'm sure there's others.
Very depressing episode for me.
Well, let's talk about someone else.
As a reanimator, I need to reanimate his career.
I wish you could. We can talk about another person from this movie who also has sadly fallen off, which is John Cusack, who, as you said, is just, and you look at his filmography, the last like 10, 15 movies he's made are just all these obscure direct-to-video thrillers. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, and you know, he's one of the Nicolas Cage types that you hear rumors that he's a little wackadoodoo, right? You know, a little loco en la cabeza, crazy.
Is that what that means?
But man, his so many iconic roles, and I know I've said that word a few times, but really, he's had iconic roles, man.
Yeah, and this was interesting. I initially was thinking the legacy of this was like, oh, this is John Cusack, and now he's a romantic lead. But really,
he already was.
Yeah, he did all those teen movies. This was like the last teen movie he did, and this was kind of a transition period for him into doing more serious adult stuff, where this movie has a lot of comedy, but maybe he got to be a little more serious, show a bit more range, and then he went on to do more serious stuff later. So, yeah, I mean, he was definitely one of the most notable stars of the 80s, of mainstream film in the 80s.
I mean, not just the 80s, the 90s too.
Yeah, with High Fidelity, like you were saying.
And Grosse Pointe Blank. Those are great movies.
Yeah, I love
being John Malkovich.
And being John Malkovich.
Yeah, and that's getting past the 90s, I think, even.
Grosse Pointe Blank and High Fidelity, 2 of the great film soundtracks of all time.
Sure. Yeah. And it's sad. I think the last thing he did that was really acclaimed and worthwhile was the Brian Wilson biopic.
Yeah, he was good in that.
And he was good in that. But I think maybe like Nicolas Cage, he just accepts roles in these crappy low budget movies because he needs the money or he wants to work, or I don't know what the reason is.
Yeah. What is this series Utopia that he's doing?
It's an upcoming, it looks interesting. I think it's an Amazon Prime series. Is based on a British show. It was developed at HBO a few years ago. It was supposed to be a David Fincher project, and he left it, and it got moved to Amazon. But that does seem like the kind of thing that could work out. I think Cusack has a smaller supporting role in it, from what I can tell. But that's probably what he should do. He should take a solid supporting role in like a serious TV series. Yeah, so maybe this will redeem him a bit.
I think the last, and he's done some good serious stuff. Thin Red Line, Terrence Malick. But the last thing we probably all remember as like a big role for him was Hot Tub Time Machine, I think.
Well, I think that Brian Wilson movie, I mean, I think he probably got some award nominations for that. And I mean, not an Oscar, but he was in the conversation there. That was a little more recently than Hot Tub Time Machine and a little more serious.
Okay.
I love Hot Tub Time Machine.
How about The Player? That's
I mean, that's like almost, that was 92.
I know.
think.
I'm just going.
It's like,
he's
he's done,
Men Out.
yeah, he's done a lot of great stuff. I just think it's been a long time, and it not only has it been a long time, but he is very prolific. And so in between like these slight moments of quality is just like this flood of crap.
I think you're right. And I also think that it's the ones that do make it so big in the pop cultural conversation that's what you think of, and you forget like, oh, he made 4 shitty movies right before this or whatever.
Right. And hey, at least that shows that he can rise to the occasion when he's given the chance to still. And Ione Skye has sort of had
working actress. I'd
yeah,
say.
but really this was like the height of her career.
Yeah, but she's worked pretty consistently all the way through. She was on Camping, I think was the last.
Yeah, the Jennifer Garner HBO series, which I never saw.
I never watched it either, but I feel like she's always been working, and there hasn't been like, Ione Skye's doing something for the first time in 17 years.
No, but it's a bit. I mean, I guess she doesn't work as much as John Cusack does, and I think she might have even said that she didn't capitalize on the success of this film as much as she could have, but maybe she didn't feel the need to. Some people, maybe she didn't want to become a huge movie star. Yeah. And that's respectable.
Yeah. I also, I mean, I think she's fine in this. She played Anvil's mother in
Arrested Development.
Yeah, the last. No, I thought she was fine in this, but I mean, this is John Cusack's movie, I'd say.
I mean, fair, I suppose. I mean, it's his movie in that it launched his further stardom, but again, I think as a movie, as a story, it's equally both of their stories.
Right. I just think he's the one who pops off the screen a little more.
Yeah, that's true. But I liked her performance. I mean, not that Jennifer Connelly or Elizabeth Shue wouldn't have done good work here, but I wasn't ever feeling like someone else would have been better or would have been preferable in that.
No. She's fine. And like I said, like working actress, if you look at her credits, she's working all the way through,
Yeah.
Pretty much every year she's done something. So
she's done something, right? But nothing that really is notable.
Hey, paying the bills is notable, Josh.
I'm sure it is.
That's
very
what she's
true.
Doing.
She is indeed. So any other thoughts on the legacy here?
No, I think this one holds up, like we said, as it is. And but at the same time, you couldn't do it right now. Couldn't make this movie again.
I suppose. I mean, there's aspects of Lloyd's character that are a little could come off as a little stalkery, but I think they handle it well.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's.
I just meant because boombox are out of fashion.
Well, that's fair. Yeah, you could. Although it would be like a cool retro thing now. He would go to like a thrift store and buy a boombox, and she'd be like, "What is that?"
Everyone would look exactly the same. You could say that at least.
That is probably true. Yeah, the fashion has come back around.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I agree. It's a good movie. Check it out if you haven't. I mean, it's a very well known movie, but if you haven't seen it, it's worth seeing.
See the movie, guys.
See it, just like Dave did for this podcast.
If Dave can do it, you can.
Yes.
So true.
Which, weirdly enough, was Diane Court's
that was her
campaign motto
when she ran for state senate.
Yeah.
So that's Say Anything, and that's this episode of Awesome Movie Year. You can follow us on social media.
And why wouldn't you? There's so much good stuff we're doing on social media. We are on awesomemovieyear.com and Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram, and Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter. I'm at goforjason.com and also Jason Harris Comedy and Jay Harris Comedy as well on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And I'm not on TikTok.
No, neither am I.
No.
Maybe Cameron Crowe is.
Maybe Kirk Cameron is.
Yeah. Hopefully not either of them. You can find me at joshbellhateseverything.com, on Twitter at SignalBleed, and on Facebook at Josh Bell Hates Everything. And listen to our producer David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
You can find Piecing It Together wherever you listen to this podcast, and also follow us on social media at Piecing Pod, and join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces.
What do we have on our next episode, Jason?
Hey, we're talking about first-time directors, man. The next one is a first-time director who has skyrocketed to the heights of probably one of the greatest filmmakers of the last 30 years. Steven Soderbergh and Sex, Lies, and Videotape, the Palme d'Or winner, of the Cannes Film Festival in 1989 and a movie that changed independent film forever. And I'm not overstating it.
So tune in for some more life-changing, industry-changing stuff.
And just for the record, we could not have made that this episode because there is no Kevin Smith connection as a first-time filmmaker.
Such a good point. Check out Sex, Lies, and Videotape on the next episode. Thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
And all points west.